What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here. I'm the design lead of Summoner's Rift Team's live pod, and I'm here to talk to you about patch 25.10, coming live to a server near you in about 1 week. Branch cut was earlier today, and so there is very low chance that anything that is in this changes, though you never know. We've micropatched things before. Let's move on. So let's talk about a few generic topics before we talk about the specific contents of the patch. First of all, 25.9, which was the 25 Season 2 Spirit Blossom update went out. As far as the gameplay changes came in, they've done pretty well. We survey our players around things like this. We got our first report in. We're going to continue to survey and have more data as time comes in, and compare it to well, what do people feel about 4 weeks? 4 weeks in to the last one and this one, whatever, kind of contrast with other seasons. It's generally pulled better than the last couple of seasons, so it's pulled better than 25.1. It pulled better than Split 3 of last year. Sort of generically, broadly, each of the individual pieces have also pulled positively, which is good. There are a few tuning things we can look at. For example, there's some indication that players think bounties could be on in more cases. I think it is going to be a little bit of a hard line to draw between winning enough and not, especially when gold leads are a really meaningful portion, because it will kind of swing wildly off of relatively small hits, because at some point you hit a threshold or you don't. But otherwise, generally pretty positive, which is really good. We're happy about that. So no immediate problems here, which is awesome. Next thing, I already made a video about this, so if you want to get more detail on why these are the changes that are happening, there is an AP item update coming into this patch. We're touching most ability power giving items. It's a couple of nerfs, it's a large number of buffs, it's a lot of adjustments that are meant to be power positive. We'll talk about them a little bit more in detail through this video, but it'll be a pretty quick hit. Overall, my feeling, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but my feeling is that the balance state of the game is pretty good. In general, during domestic play, we are not going to be terribly pro-focused. We did exactly one pro change in the last couple of patches, which was a Callista nerf. Otherwise, we're generally going to let the pro meta be what the pro meta is. We will very overtly cultivate the pro meta heading into things like MSI and Worlds, and I'm not going to shake the entire game above its head, but if we're like, hey, you know what? Even though Varus is not overpowered in solo queue, but he's now the de facto bot laner in pro play, well, let's just not nerf him and sit there for some indeterminate amount of time. We're just going to leave Varus weak just for, a bit more of a pro shakeup. No, we'll do it for MSI. Here's a warning. We're going to nerf Varus for MSI. I'm pretty sure anyway. We haven't made the declaration, but we probably will. Because for the rest of the year, other than the one patch where he's bad, or I guess two if it comes back for Worlds, whatever, it's no, let this champion be playable for regular people, and that's fine. And the nice thing about Fearless and Best of series is we automatically get all of the variants that we want in terms of champions. So I think I've talked about sort of tangentially around before. There's still some level of pro cultivation we could do long term to make, I think, a more long term interesting sport, but as far as champion balance, again, we're not really going after pro stuff. So I think for solo queue, the game is relatively well balanced right now. We did actually stand up another survey pretty recently around player perception of champion balance. I talked about one for items in the AP items video, but we have one for champion power perception as well. What's interesting is the one for the month of April. It ran from the data slice came from end of March to end of April, 25th to 25th roughly. Cassante was the most, either first or second. No, Cassante was number one. Cassante was the most voted overpowered champion in the game, which is wild. But the sample size is pretty good. This is not variance. It was really clearly Cassante. Second place was Yone. Now, to be fair, that coincided with Yone getting the crit chance buff at the same time, and so he was actually quite OP for a while and very popular. So I totally get why Yone would be crushing in the polls there. But Cassante was above that, and it's really, which is weird, but. So this is still kind of early days of figuring out what we want to do with this, but we have a fairly robust, again, good sample monthly player perception of balance thing. Obviously, by definition, is going to be fairly laggy as a result. Hey, we got the end of April results back. Cool, it's early May. We just patched lock 0.10. The earliest we can do anything about this realistically without being really knee-jerk would be 0.11. Well, people answering stuff a month and a half or 2 months ago are going to... So, again, this is not immediately usable. But we're going to figure out how we're going to use this and make some new declarations and probably fine tune our balance strategy using this at least to some degree. Keep in mind, I don't know, there's a lot to go into here. I don't want to say much more because, again, we haven't really dug in to figure out what we want to do with this. But having more info is nice. Having an idea of what people feel is good. What I've really come to realize, and we moved this way already a little bit, but I think I'm further emboldened by what we're seeing from this, this beginning of this survey result, is there are a lot of high ban rate champions that are not banned because of power. So Morgana, for example, has a very, very high ban rate. She does not score highly in the "this champ is OP" poll, which I find very interesting. I have to double check that we have a different one. I'm just going to stop here. Ultimately, without diving too much into it, we are likely to alleviate some things around champions who typically are banned a lot. There will probably be some evolution to our balance strategy, trying to take more of player sentiment into account. I'll leave it at that. Move forward. Next thing is there are some work in progress things coming out of live that there are more than what's written here, but I'm going to talk about the things that I am directly working on. So I merged Garen, kind of a small scale update into release earlier today. This is small. This is more akin to things like this isn't like York where it's like, oh, we've added a new mechanic on this champion, whatever. I'm trying to think of like good examples of this where I why am I blanking on this? Because I was thinking about it earlier, and it's like, actually, when I've done these to like move numbers around and like solve pro problems, they've tended to work. So like getting Tristana back in a bot lane worked really well. And it's like move some numbers around, but like make Tristana bot laner, and Tristana's like a successful bot laner again. So it's more like that, where it's like, let's do some number shifts to like make sure this champion is functioning well. And it's basically allowing Garen to build fighter items and make that a successful build, while still, you can build him bursty crit, but his generically best build is going to be fighter, and so he's going to kill you a little bit less quickly, but he's going to actually have the tools to survive frontline, and so it's a power reshape that puts him there. I think that's going pretty well. We merged it down, and so we'll do some final tuning touches over the next 2 weeks, but that'll probably be going out in 0.11. If we have to pull it back, we will, but I don't think we will. Next one is Rammus. Rammus is still sitting in future, so he might merge down for 11, he might not. I'm really not sure yet. But this is right now largely around increasing the satisfaction and impact feels of Q and R, stripping some complexity out of the kit that feels kind of dangly, and allowing him to be good against magic damage auto attackers, not just physical damage ones. So you still want to pick him against champions like Azir and Gwen instead of getting like crushed by them because he can't get any magic resist. So vaguely what's going on with Ram is there. We'll see if it works in 11 or later or what. And then I'm very likely to go through every other item system over the next several months and do tune-ups like with what happened here with the AP system, ensure, like, either identify what gaps there are in the itemization system, make sure that builds look appropriate, that overall power levels are appropriate, and yeah, TBD on what's going to happen here, because I suspect some of these are in fairly rough shape and like need a couple of item additions or substantial reworks, where I think the AP space was like, oh, we just need to broaden horizon focus and then do some tuning. So we'll see, right? There might not be anything coming out next patch, but that's going to be an ongoing project that I'll be taking on. All right, finally onto the patch itself. We're 8 minutes in. Let's talk about the AP item system real quick. We're nerfing Leanders by 10 AP. This item is pretty clearly overpowered, and by nerfing it, we get room for a lot of other items to shine. That said, though, I mean, the ultimate result is going to be that we're going to end up power creeping up the AP item system. I suspect we're going to have to nerf some more things down the line, but for now, let's give things a shot in the arm. Let's have players realize these things are good, and then if we get into a steady state and we're like, yeah, mages are OP, we can pull the newest, highest outliers down. We should get in a decent state long term, but I suspect mages are going to be kind of OP. I mean, right now, they're like buying a bunch of Landries and are kind of OP. They're going to switch items and probably still be a bit OP. We'll think about it long term, but for now, hey, by the way, here's the only direct nerf, though there are other changes that are power negative overall. There are some direct buffs as well that are inarguably just straight up power. Builder's Curse is indeed not very good. 5 AP, 50 health, and the shred rate's going up by 50%. Max shred is still 30%, but it's going to take 4 hits instead of 6. There is some concern this gets overly poached. We'll see, but a pretty much strict buff here. Luden's Companion is going along with a general idea that we're going to try to push burstier AP builds to be cheaper, spike sooner. Some will spike at 1, some will spike at 2 items before we expect them to lightly get outscaled over time towards 3 and 4 compared to like other carry classes, like maybe an AD fighter or an AD carry, for example. on average, not every single case, of course, but making things cheaper in a lot of cases. So Luden's going to be a very cheap Lost Chapter item. Malignance is getting 5 ability power, is similarly underpowered to Luden's, so kind of useful there. A minor thing about Luden's is I added a max damage calculation to the tooltip, so if you hit somebody who's isolated, it'll tell you that it's going to do, I think it's what, 150 plus 10% AP, or 20% AP, one of the two. So it just kind of displays like, hey, by the way, here's the numbers in case you get someone out. Because I think this item hits an isolated champion more than you would think, and so I think it's reasonable to show players like, hey, this proc is effective. It's actually quite high, and it's more than Storm Surge. Simple buff in Morellonomicon. Item kind of sucks. It's not meant to be good to finish. You're meant to like Oblivion Orb if it makes sense for you, and then go buy other stuff. That's going to still be true here. Morellonomicon will be incorrect to finish in most games unless you really, really need the slot, and that's fine. That's still the intended design here. Nashor's Tooth, minus 100 gold. Again, tends to align with melee and squishy champions, tend to allow them to spike a bit sooner. And if Nashor's Tooth is very good, and you occasionally see someone like Orianna or Victor try this item, I think that is fine. It's meant to be fringe viable on champs who have minor auto-attack synergy, but aren't normally going to auto-attack a ton. And Rabadon's Death Cap, I think, very slightly weak. Obviously, a 100 gold decrease on a 3600 gold item is not as big of a buff as a 100 gold decrease on a 27-ish 100 gold item. So the Luden's buff is bigger than the Rabadon's buff, which is backed up by data. But again, letting high AP builds spike harder and feel better at their builds, generally a direct goal here. Then there's some adjustments. Most of these are intended to be positive, and buffs overall will go by them. So Crypt Bloom is getting 15 AP, which is quite good, but it's getting nerfed by 150 gold, and the AP ratio on the heal is going down by 5%. Crypt Bloom is one of a few items still here where the AP ratio really, really dwarfs the base value, which ties it really strongly to champs like Veigar, weirdly enough. Veigar is the biggest user of Crypt Bloom for, again, pretty obvious scaling reasons. That's not meant to be the intent here. It's meant to be more broad. It's not meant to be for AP printers necessarily. So, you know, again, it's still a minor nerf here. I think the heal really does carry meaningful power. I think it's actually a fairly important thing. I think Crypt Bloom is actually currently not that bad of an item. I think it's not terribly weak. This is a pretty big buff, sure. Right? It's probably gaining, 300 something gold worth of power. It's losing, 200-ish or so gold worth of other stuff. It's still power positive here. But this should make Crypt Bloom look pretty favorable, or at least more directly favorable towards Void Staff, where it's same price point and you're trading off, I think, 20 ability power and 10% magic pen for 20 haste, which is better than 20 AP, and this heal, which I'm not going to say is necessarily better than 10% magic pen, but the sum total of the parts should be good enough to be a direct comparison and feel pretty good. Rocket Belt is pretty clearly power positive. 10 AP and 5 haste for minus 50 health is like pretty clearly strong. Rocket Belt's current tuning is something like, it's like roughly 2 parts damage, 1 part durability, which makes it like pretty much in the middle of almost Juggernaut territory. It's like close to Riley's level of damage to durability, and that's not quite true. But basically it's like too heavy of an item to properly... Oh, I think there's also a 50 gold nerf here. I forgot to write down. So a 50 health and 50 gold is the nerf. Again, still going to be an overall buff to the item. The stat efficiency here is much better. But this is basically saying it's much more like Skirmisher tuned, which means it's like the exact right stat profile for, say, like an Echo in a lot of cases, or a Conqueror Akali type build. It should still feel good for Kennen and Fiddlesticks. It should still be acceptable for Mordecai. So I don't expect them to really build it, but like it will fit just barely. And so trying to toe the line between like it's a little bit light for Juggernaut, but it'll be okay, and it's a little bit heavy for an Assassin, but it'll be okay. It's very inexpensive. You are clearly trading off damage for target access, and if you want to do so, congratulations, great, have fun, and that should be an okay enough decision point. There's maybe a world where we're meant to grow this item even further and add another 150 gold, 200 gold to the price point, add some more attack damage or ability power or whatever. I'm not really sure, but cheap target access item spike should be decent here, should be a playable item. Again, item's a bit weak, so a buff here overall. Horizon Focus is the one real item rework here. What I'm going to say is basically that by genericizing the item, it gets to get a whole new set of users. This is the kind of item that the current Syndra Cosmic Drive is meant to want. Hey, I'm a ranged mage that stays out of range most of the time, and I really want high uptime spells. Horizon Focus. Like, that's meant to be the thing. Here's a stack of AP. Here's a stack of haste. You're a squishy champion. Go have fun. Like, this is meant to be for these champions. It should be the clear slot 2 option for Orianna, Victor, all these champions who I wouldn't say are complete battle mages. They don't need to build more durable. Whereas, like, if you're Swain or Cassiopeia and you are stuck, like, actually taking hits from enemy champions, you don't get the ability to space them. You've got to stay in range. Yeah, those champs buy health. But if you have the ability to stay out of range while doing your job, Horizon Focus should be the item for you. The fact that really no one but the 3 artillery mages buy this, right? Lux, Vel'Koz, Xerath, basically the 3 big users here. Zig sometimes as well, okay, fine. But the fact that no one else really buys this item means that this conditional damage amp is scaring off all the would-be users. As much as people might say, wow, but 10% damage amp is totally better than 35 AP, if it was better, people would buy the item. And they don't. Right? And you look at the win rate data of champs who could theoretically buy the item, but don't, like, because some people still buy stuff, you get enough data to, like, get a reliable enough, like, indication of win rate, and it's like, nope, doesn't look very good on those champions either. And it's like, well, the conclusion I have is that clearly this conditional damage amp is conditional enough that, 1, it's scaring off users, and 2, it's actually just not that good because it would be winning games otherwise, right? And sure, yes, sometimes players will just overlook good things. The new mid lane meta, apparently, is buy a Catalyst, go build other items, but Catalyst itself isn't any stronger than it was 10 months ago. Sure, the Ruby Crystal build path is nicer, but, like, who cares? No, set on full Catalyst. Oh yeah, the mana regen's slightly higher. Like, that, no. Like, that, nope, it's just here. This is the build now. Funny, but that's there. So yeah, maybe it's been overlooked, but, like, not from what I can tell from data. Like, it's not like it's a big win rate actual granter. So end result is that obviously if you were perfectly using the amp at a lot of the time, this is clearly going to be a nerf for you. If we have to buff artillery champions who use the item very well, we will simply buff them. We'll buff them 0.11. It's not a big deal. But I do expect the item to open up for a lot more users, and that should be a good thing overall. Lichbane, moving on finally, is getting cheaper. It's getting 15 AP. It's getting a nicer build path. Great, a better first item spike for assassins and any other sort of Lichbane user. Seraph's Embrace is getting a meaningful reshape here. It is getting no price changes, no ability power, no offensive changes, but the tuning of Seraphs is such that it is a pretty big stack of defenses, even on champions who don't tend to actually need it. And so it's sort of crowding out the burst space because it's a little bit too easy to get good access to anti-burst when that's not really meant to be, it's just not meant to be that strong overall. So there's 2 changes here. 1 is what's meant to be a nerf on average, and 2 is a reshape of its user base. So it's going from 200 plus 20% current mana to simply 18% of max mana. Clearly, inarguably, if you come out of base at full mana and you get hit, the shield is clearly worse. So what I targeted here overall as a power level was about 1/4 off the shield. You may have seen on PvE that one of the tunings here was 150 plus 15% current mana, which would have been, of course, a flat 15% nerf. What I ballparked was, in the average case, and maybe I am wrong about this, but whatever, in the average case, spending 600 mana before the shield pops. I think that is reasonable for the average case of playing League of Legends out. Obviously, sometimes you come back from base and you spend 0 mana. Sometimes you played a long-term team fight and you spent a lot more than that. I ballparked 600 spending mana as a reasonable middle ground for the shield and said, well, if I look at several of the common uses of this item and I say you spent 600 mana and then the shield pops, what's the size? And it's like, oh, it's 25% lower. Great. So that's the number I chose. That's where 18% came from, was, okay, what's it at 20? What's it at 15? What's it, okay, no, 17 is a little bit too low. 18, yep, 18 is the number. Cool, so I picked 18. So Seraph's Embrace is 18% max mana. Now, the side grade here is that for really mana-hungry champions, who tend to be the ones who actually want to enjoy Seraph's Embrace, Kassadin, Cassiopeia, Rise if you spam long enough, for those champions, this max mana thing is going to be a buff in some cases. It's not hard to have 2,000 max mana on Kassadin, but be at 500 mana because you're using all your mana up, and hey, guess what? The math says it's now a buff for you. Now, is this strictly a buff to Kassadin? No, there's going to be cases where the shield gets popped really early on, and he hasn't spent all the mana down. Totally going to be the case. There'll be cases where you would have had blue buff and had full mana anyway. That's still going to be true as well, right? So, obviously the old Seraphs had pretty high variance in how good or bad it was. It's going to be much more direct. The other nice thing here is it means that because we know the number, the tooltip is going to very, very cleanly say, hey, by the way, here's how much it gives. Hey, by the way, it's this much mana. Have fun, buddy. It's this much shield because we know how much max mana you have and it doesn't change all the time. So that'll be there as a pretty convenient trigger. You can actually know what your shield value is. Okay, great. It also guarantees that in all cases, Seraphs plus Roa, right, the Roa will always increase your shield size. You get a Malignance instead on Kassadin. That will always increase your shield size instead of, well, sometimes I'm at 0 and the shield is still only 200. So again, meant to be a nerf on average. It will be a nerf on average, but that's the point there. And then Storm Surge. It's a simplification here. 100 gold cheaper, 202% flat MS, just buff there, so 6% total MS on this item. And then basically just pulling out some complexity that we don't think is really needed. So minus 30 gold You no longer get the 30 gold payout if they die for the explosion. It's not doing very much. It's not carrying a lot of power. I mean, it technically is. In some cases, you get that gold. That's gone. It's just text. It doesn't really do anything. It doesn't change how you feel about the item. It's just, if we can remove complexity, we should. That one's free. The other one is the simple move speed percent trigger. At the end of the day, this can easily happen in the middle of your mage rotation. You happen to, chunk them in your first 2 spells. You've got 2 more to cast, and you waste a lot of this trigger and whatnot. At the end of the day, I think it's carrying a lot of sort of mind share on the item. It often not what these champions actually want or need, because they've already got Echo Ult or whatever to get out, and the move speed goes to waste, and we can just sharpen the item, make it more direct. If it's weak afterwards, we can just give it numbers. That's fine. But I'm generally a fan of, if you can pull things off of the items and be like, no, if you want Phase Rush, just take Phase Rush. We're not going to give you Phase Rush on an item that's also giving you burst damage. Generally a positive in my mind to focus items a bit more sharply. They can still be exciting, they can still do really powerful things for you, but let's be a bit more focused on average. Other systems, we are buffing Unsealed Spellbook pretty meaningfully. The first cast is still at 6 minutes, by the way, but the base cooldown of the swap is going from 5 minutes to 4, which also means that because the cap is still at 6 swaps, the cap cooldown, when you've swapped a bunch of summoner spells, goes from 2.5 minutes to 1.5 minutes. That's obviously a pretty big deal. I'm double checking because I don't have it in front of me, but I did the math, and if you're able to swap on cooldown forever, you go from getting 6 summoners in a 30-minute game to getting 10 summoners in a 30-minute game. So this is coming close to doubling the number of summoner spells the thing gives you, which is a pretty big deal. Now, you're not actually swapping exactly on cooldown every time, of course, but it is asymptotically approaching almost twice as many summoner spells over the course of a game, which is a pretty good deal, right? It's a very, very large buff. I do want to point out that there was a bug fix in 2508 that bug fixed it going on the in-combat cooldown when you hit things like wards. So that was fixed up a little while ago. So some of that QOL has been in already. This probably makes this rune pretty good. I expect to see pro play again. Which is, I think, a good thing overall. Also, another minor anecdote, it changes your summoner TP cooldown functionally from 10 minutes to 6, since you have to do 4 swaps to get it back. I believe that's the right way to do that math. So, cool. Some fun stuff there. Let's move on. We go into champion changes. We've only got about, I think, 12 or so, 11, I think, in this patch. So we got some simple ones. We got some more complex ones. We'll go for the simple ones first. It's honestly just, we are trying to be a bit nerf heavy in this patch. The previous buff was very buff heavy. Keep in mind, we also changed some AP items, which I think is also buff heavy. But we try to be cognizant of how much we power creep on a bi-monthly basis or so. And so trying to make sure we don't go too buff heavy if possible, because we should try to hit from both ends if possible. Anyway, Kayn, really simple change, -6 health growth. The current most picked junglers in solo queue are Lee Sin and Viego, both of which are not terribly high win rate. And so in a world where win rate has to be 0-sum, it has to be distributed across the entire roster, clearly Lee Sin and Viego don't seem to need more power to woo a player base. Let's, again, try to distribute win rate and power as equitably as possible to let some of the unpopular champions have their day in the limelight, and overall let there be sort of more essentially champion variance game to game. So that's kind of a thing that we're doing. So anyway, Kayn is statistically a bit strong. He's also relatively popular, so he's both agile for lose a little bit of win rate. -6 health growth, not a very big deal, but again, the more we can, in general, I like if we're able to generally take down scaling when we can, harm or health damage as well, if it ever makes sense to do so. So -6 health growth for Kayn. Not a huge deal, but definitely a real nerf. Okay, fine, moving forward. Lulu RCD. I think RCD is the one that's going to be carrying the most knowledgeable impact here. Lulu is one of the most picked supports, one of the highest ban rate supports, seems to still be quite OP. It's been a lot of nerfs. She's been really, really resilient to nerfs overall. We still like that she's good at supportive aspects. We can make them, it's good that they're potent, but hey, the 20 seconds of ult cooldown, we can take that one back. At level 11 will take a long time, but at level 11, it's a 10-second cooldown increase still. So a little bit less access to the saving. Cool, there is a Lulu nerf. Also just hit magnitude, because we don't think we're going to get enough win rate change off just the 20 seconds. We don't want to bump it to 140 or something. That seems kind of unfair. A small amount of armor growth as a champion, because it will have some win rate magnitude, and just trying to get about 1% off of Lulu here. Nefiri, we're trying to be as jungle skewed as possible. A moderately Optimized Nefiri jungle clear is like 118 with, using the bleed and running away and using your pet and whatnot. So there is a lot of room for nerfing an optimized Nefiri jungle clear. And we think Nefiri mid is not too strong, maybe even potentially slightly weak. For now, we're just doing a very simple nerf to just directly nerf Nefiri jungle. Probably try to put her somewhere between 48 and 49% at the current expressed win rate. I expect that to long-term still grow over time. There aren't a lot of Nefiri, like high master Nefiri players in the jungle right now, but if she lands at 48, 48.5 for a while and still slowly grows over time, that is still a champion that is probably relatively balanced long-term, and we can let people kind of grow into the mastery curve from there. Next change is to Smolder. So Smolder is statistically not terribly weak. If you look at high master Smolder players, they are winning a normal number of games. That said, what tends to feel balanced for players is that champions who are not good in lane, who have to wait to express their power, do not feel balanced at balanced adjusted win rates. And so Smolder is the kind of champion who deserves to be +1, maybe +1.5, and will feel balanced to play as and play against. The work we did a while back to try to get him out of pro with all his gains stolen was clearly pretty effective. We got him to a much stronger state than he was back when he was kind of pro jailed. He's still not pro jailed. We have room for some power, and so we're going to, for now, give him power in the thing that is certainly most on fantasy, but is also among the highest pro risk. We got rid of his extremely good wave clear. That's great. That was a really good thing for pro affinity without really hurting that much for his solo queue gameplay. But the changes here are increasing the damage on Q per stack by 33%. Is increasing the damage on the Q burn per stack by 25%. Now that said, most of the damage here does not come from the burn per stack. It's mostly in the 80 ratio. That is kind of intended, to be honest. The checkmatiness of like a 300 stack Smolder who just burns you for too much health, like we just want that to be a weaker lever here, but soften it a little bit, sure. And then the E damage per stack going up by 20% here as well. Ultimately, in terms of stacks versus gold scaling, these are the three parts. Like W is actually in a pretty good spot for stack scaling relative to gold scaling, but in terms of the E and the Q, and really both has the Q, this is one where okay, we can try to push toward more equilibrium, and that way we can have stacks and gold be a bit more equitable across the entire kit. And so that's why these were the ones that were chosen. Xin Zhao, pretty simple, straightforward nerf. Minus 0.6 armor growth. Usually that's about 1% win rate on a jungle fighter. That's kind of the goal here. Just bring down some overall tankiness, make him rely on R a bit more. Okay, fine. He's just kind of generally OP, and we have room. He happens to also align with being a big pro play pick. Okay, fine. It's not because of pro, but it's really an indication that, like, okay, a lot of player cohorts think this champion is one of the best. He's really popular in high win rate in solo queue. Check the boxes, pretty easy enough to go for. Yuumi has really crept up recently as a top end support as well. This champion does not need as much power as she has to hold on to her player base and feel good there. And in general, right, especially high elo competitive players tend to be kind of like offended and don't tend to be very happy when Yuumi is one of the best things you can play. This champion, again, can completely sustain nerfs. Data supports it, no problem. A lot of Nefiri players, weirdly, are pretty low mastery on her, so you tend to get some win rate deflation because the champion is like actually kind of hard to master. Easy to start, but hard to master, and so very sustainable nerf here on the Yuumi R. Next is going into the slightly more complex change list here. I apologize that the webcam is blocking this. I will try to make this not so silly. Let's see, I'm going to drag it up to here so that we can see all the text. Okay. All right, so Cho'Gath. Yeah, pretty simple change to Cho'Gath. This is still done for mid versus top skew. We got some decent progress in the last time we did this. We're going to do some more of it here. So again, another minus 0 to 20 on the Q damage. Q max first tends to be the common mid order. It is usually second in top, and W second is competitive or slightly better. So even if you do Q second in top lane every game, this is still less of a nerf in top lane than in mid because you're maxing it first in mid in most cases. We're giving him 5% attack speed at level 1. It's like 5.2%, whatever, but increasing level 1 attack speed so that if you're in an auto attack trade situation, it's better. If you're using your E for wave clear, it's better. If you don't run Hail of Blades, it's better. The value of Hail of Blades is slightly lower when your overall attack speed is higher. No big surprise there. The compensation buff further here, and this actually might be, and this actually, we expect it to be power positive in top lane as a result, is increasing the damage on the E per hit by 0 to 4% max health. It's not a huge difference, sure, don't get me wrong there, but it is still a damage difference. It still does matter. And so the buff to top lane is, I think, not insignificant. I think he gains win rate in top lane. He will likely lose some win rate in mid. That's what we're hoping anyway. But the initial goal for this was to give some slight amounts of power to Cho'Gath top. top. He tends to be a low agency, slow tank. These are the kind of champions that are allowed to usually sit at pretty good win rates. One, because they have relatively low agency when they're not doing a Shirelius build and coming out of mid lane, and two, because it's nice to have good viable tanks that help combat pacing feel a bit more measured. I think the game is good when there is at least one tank in each team, and so I think it is reasonable to incentivize playing tanks in a lot of places. I guess we have Lulu still here. I forgot to delete it. Don't worry about that one. Moving on to Fiddlesticks. So this is another reshape. The goal is to nerf Fiddlesticks support and keep Fiddlesticks jungle relatively equal. What's interesting is from what I've seen from community sentiment is that Fiddlesticks is going to be really OP in the jungle, and what we're concerned about internally is that Fiddlesticks jungle is not compensated well enough. I guess this is what happens, but interesting to see the difference of opinions. So Fiddlesticks support, the best way to build him is to Q max and build full tank. Some people go W max, some people build AP. Those Fiddlesticks builds are not terribly overpowered. It's the Q max tank build that is overpowered. And so we're trying to pretty sharply go after the build that's OP. So the fear duration is down by up to a quarter second when maxed, and the damage is down by up to 3% current health when maxed. And if they've already been feared and you press Q and they're already feared, then this is doubled, and instead of getting 18%, it's 12%. So 6% current health on the spellcast. And getting max at first, level 9 is not that hard to get for support, so, fairly real there. Now, of course, the compensation is, well, 1% per 100 ability power. Now, realistically, Fiddlesticks jungle is going to need 300 ability power to meet this. That's going to take a while. Now, it's the thing he maxes second, so he's not going to hit this, really bad right away, but he's not going to get 100 AP at rank 1, and he's not going to get 300 AP at level 13, right? And he's still using the fear nerf. So, Fiddlesticks jungle is losing straight up win rate from the Q adjustment, right? Fiddlesticks support is losing way more, outright granted there. Now, the major compensation buff for Fiddlesticks jungle is the W ability power ratio going up by 0.05. This is per second, by the way. The full channel of W is 2 seconds, and then it has a chunk of missing health damage. So this even feeds in to not only the second of the drain, but also the missing health damage chunk that comes at the end. Now, this plus a buff to Malignance, a buff to Rocket Belt. I know he builds Leandries, don't get me wrong, but there is a world where you can find a new build. There is, of course, a world where it's really a nerf to Fiddlesticks jungle. To be fair, he's had a pretty high win rate for a while. That said, it's tended to be okay for him to have this. I think it's palatable that Fiddlesticks has a somewhat inflated win rate. He's not really popular. He's not people aren't running over to Flavor of the Month get free wins on him, and so it's the kind of place where it's okay to park some win rate because it doesn't really damage the rest of the roster very much. End of the day, it's, I think, a pretty clear and obvious nerf to Fiddle support, one that is pretty strongly needed. The pick rate and banner are still rising. There is a small chance we would have delayed this by another patch, just to let it catch on more, but I think enough players understand Fiddle support is definitely OP. Anyway, moving on. Senna is a pretty meaningful adjustment. So I don't know what caused this. There might be someone might have a good hypothesis of why, but for some reason, Senna... AD Senna in the bot lane lost over 1% win rate last patch. The enchanter builds didn't seem to go down. I don't know what caused this. Pick rate didn't spike off anything. It just seems like she got worse for some reason. I don't know what happened here. Regardless, it means that her win rates look pretty bad, and so we're going for an adjustment here. And one thing we've noticed is that AD Senna builds are much worse than enchanter Senna builds. And so we would like to... raise that up. We should try to buff AD Senna, keep enchanter Senna relatively equal, and then the secondary thing is also playing bot lane farm Senna is really, really bad right now. It's terribly weak. And the nice thing is we have this really obvious bespoke lever, which is called the on minion kill soul drop chance. We're going to buff that one as a specific throw to bot lane Senna. So the first change here is the crit chance gained per 20 souls is going back up from 8% to 10%. Now this is going to be the strongest this lever has ever been, because for most of Senna's lifetime, she had a deflated crit damage ratio. And so even if the numbers were technically higher than 8 or 10%, the functional damage per auto she got from this was a lot lower, because 10% crit chance when your crit mod is 1.4 is not the same thing. When your crit mod is 1.7, 8% is actually quite good. This will now be the highest functional crit damage Senna has gotten per soul, I believe, in her entire history. But hey, letting her play up as a good auto attacker, very reasonable. Letting these AD builds with a lot of souls still be good at healing and shielding, absolutely, right? She should not just be a damage carry. She should have meaningful crowd control outputs, meaningful CC, and healing and supportive aspects here as well. But sure, for now, we can give her some more damage. That's totally fine. The compensation nerf for that is 10% AP ratio on the heal on Q. She doesn't build a ton of ability power, but her most common enchanter build really is Echoes of Helia, Moonstone, Dawncore, and that is a solid amount of ability power. Now, getting to 3 full items is not that common, of course, sure. But hey, that's still 200-ish, not quite 200, but a decent amount of ability power, so it's going to go down some. And then again, the everyone's favorite lever. It's so weird that the prevailing community sentiment, like the comments that tend to get made and then upvoted before rational minds come in and say, like, what are you doing? Is that like, XD, here comes right, change his number again. It's like, yeah, this number is specifically here to be a tuning lever for bot versus support. It is very direct. It is very obvious. It has basically no collateral damage. It does give a little bit of power to support Senna, since she will last hit minions sometimes. But I've looked at the data. I know how many minions that Senna kills on average, and it's like, oh yeah, with the bump being under 6% here, it's like, yeah, every like 18 minions that she kills, she gets 1 more soul. Okay, that's going to be like 1 soul on average to support Senna. A bit more than that, sure, but like, all right, that's a very small amount of power. All right, what does like farm Senna get? Around 150 CS or so. She's getting somewhere, in the tune of like about 10 more souls from this. Okay, that's pretty meaningful. This actual lever was used in isolation a couple years back, and it went from, I think it went from like 8-point-something% to like 4-point-something%. And so a change of 4-ish% soul drop chance, right? 1 soul per 25 CS roughly. It was only about 1% win rate to bot farm Senna. And so I figured, okay, well, we can bump this by, more like 5.5%. That should be, closer to 2% win rate with the other stuff here combined as well. And it's like, okay, we're gonna kind of gingerly move bot lane farm Senna toward viability. We'll see where she looks after this. If we want to do more changes, we will, but we're gingerly moving farm Senna back into viability. Cool. Next one is a power adjustment to Vi. My expectation is going to be lightly power negative, not severely so, but it should meaningfully improve, or at least measurably improve, the playing against experience of fighting Vi. So on live right now, Vi Q does between 1 or 2x the damage based on how long it's been charged, but it's changing from 1 to 2.5x with a base damage and a AD ratio lowering. So tap Q is going from 45-145 plus 0.8 to 40-120 plus 0.6. What that means is tap Q from level 9 onwards is minus 25 flat damage and minus 20% bonus AD ratio. Considering that Vi builds AD on every slot, this is a meaningful amount of damage. It's pretty easy at about 2 items and change for this to be a solid 40 damage off a chunk. That is a lot of damage to lose. 40 damage on a reliable spell is a lot of damage. That is a meaningful amount of win rate. However, the max charge of Q is being buffed by 10 damage flat, but nerfed by 10% bonus AD. So at 100 bonus AD, it becomes a nerf again, but until then, it's actually slightly more powerful. And because a full charge Q is going to be used from out of combat, you're not going to have Conqueror stacks in most cases, and so you really have to be all the way to like 3 items before this really matters, because she only has like the 1 damage stat shard, so it really does take until you're done with more than 2 items till this actually becomes a nerf. But hey, eventually, sure, long term it becomes a nerf. Regardless, this says, hey, let's make sure more of Vi's power is in the button with a lot of gameplay that can be dodged, that can be played around, and that's usually going to be more a healthier thing overall, because she's been overtaking pro for a while with high reliability, tap Q being a decent part of that, where it's just a lot of guaranteed reliable throughput. And keep in mind, right, Vi tap Q is full crowd control. The CC duration does not scale with charge amount, and so there's really not a reason to charge up Q unless you're doing some minor jungle optimizations, but otherwise no. So this is, lightly positive to slightly neutral. I would say it's a buff on its own. This is obviously a pretty direct nerf. Small reset quality of life to Vi Q. So Vi Q can be canceled in 2 ways. You can hold it until it runs out of time, in which case you get half your mana back. Or if you get CC'd while holding it, you'll get half your mana back, and it will reset the cooldown to 3 seconds. The way that was hooked up was under a buff, and the buff, all it did was say, when the buff deactivates, set the cooldown to 3 seconds. Now, the way buffs work in League of Legends is it deactivates after a small variable delay, and the result was that you get CC'd, you would skip a heartbeat, and then it would reset your cooldown to 3 seconds. Which is not a big deal, but it would really means that you got CC'd and your cooldown would be 3.25 seconds, roughly. So I just changed the scripting here to say, let's not use a buff. Let's just say you got CC'd, wait 1/100th of a second, which is really just a 30th of a second in functional practice. Now go reset the Q cooldown to 3 seconds. you have to wait a heartbeat because technically you're still in the channel when it's canceling, and that you're still in the channel, so reset the cooldown doesn't do anything. And then the channel ends, and then it would be 6 seconds. It'd be like the actual cooldown. So you have to wait a heartbeat. Basically, it's just like a small QOL. It's easy cleanup. And cool. When your queue gets canceled by someone CCing, you get a quarter second back on average, roughly. Also, bug fix here. Vi's E crit damage was hard coded as we technically can't look up your actual crit damage in a script. And so Vi said we can only look up your bonus crit damage. And so her scripting said, look up my bonus crit damage and then add 1, because when she was built, right, crit damage was 2.0, and then add that, basically take that times my total AD, and then add that to my E damage if I had crit on this ability, right? Which is like the right way, like, right, add the total AD crit, to the number, and then make that the number, right? That's like the right way to do things. But of course, because it was hard coded as add 1, she was critting for 2.0, right? And so a Sundered Sky E would always crit for 2.0. And you would get, an extra 100% total AD, even though you didn't deserve it. Because Sundered Sky is just a true crit, right? So I changed that. I added some... basically, I moved the calculation to say, okay, well, if it's not in the script itself, if it's in, like, the character or, like, the spell's, like, data, essentially, you can actually look up their true crit damage multiplier and say, okay, well, let's look up that. Look at the crit multiplier, subtract 1, because that returns the number 1.75, whereas the other number returns 0, right? If you don't have an IE, looking up in script looks up, gives you 0 because it's the bonus mod. This looks up the total crit damage, which we can actually look up in somewhere else, and I subtract 1, which gives us 75%. It's also resilient to any future changes. It also means if she gets an IE, it will return 1.15 and say, okay, now take that, multiply by total AD. Great, we can get the damage here. So anyone who was not getting the auto reset on E and just pressing E right away and using Sundered Sky with it, which is the most common pro build by far, bug fix, hooray. 25 total AD gone from instant E here. Vi ult is one of the 3 ults left in the game that still scales the mana cost with rank. Pulling that out. Obviously, it's a power positive change. It's not very important, though. And then finally taking 0, 25, and 50 damage off of the R. So this means that if you're doing the normal no counterplay combo for Vi, which is R in tap Q and then either E first or auto E, if you do the E first, you're losing 25, well, from level 11 onwards, losing 25, 50 damage on R. You're losing at 2 items, 45 damage on tap Q. And if you're using E first, you're losing another 40-ish damage on instant E. Wow. We'll call it 40 damage here, 40 damage here, 40 damage here. Wow, our tap Q instant E is 120 damage lower on the combo. That's a lot of guaranteed burst damage gone. I, for fun, really quickly looked up the full combo scaling of Vi versus Nocturne. I think Nocturne's overall, like, diver scaling is quite good, where it is really, really hard for Nocturne to one-shot you, but he's a very reliable diver with an unstoppable point-and-click dash, right? Wow, it's a really apt comparison here between these champions, right? Nocturne doesn't hard CC you for it, of course. He has to wait 2 seconds for the fear, and it's like, oh, the base damage is technically a little bit higher on Nocturne, but Vi stuns you for it, and the bonus AD growth on this is so much higher that, like, in actual practice at item 1, 2, 3, Vi tends to out-damage Nocturne in the guaranteed combo case. Understand that you can still, like, flash out of Nocturne E and things like that. It's like, oh, actually, Vi outbursts Nocturne. Vi out CCs Nocturne. Of course, Nocturne has more reach, of course. Vi has better sustain damage because her W is awesome. And again, she has CC. So it's like, we should probably move this to the point where Vi doesn't outburst the Nocturne because she's locking them in place. But we can give her, totally solid sustained damage output. There was a version here where we actually buffed the bonus AD ratio on W. And in fact, if Vi kind of sucks next patch, I'm very happy to buff the W bonus AD ratio because it's actually kind of weak. And playing up her ability to do well in sustained combat is very reasonable. It's very normal for a diver to want to succeed in sustained combat and be able to take on, like, any and all comers and try to keep going. That's, like, meant to be part of how that kind of champion works. They're not assassins. They specifically are meant to keep fighting. Really minor thing, because I wanted to. So I did this change on Monday night, or Monday evening, whatever. Then on Tuesday morning, for whatever reason, I loaded Vi back up because I wanted to check things because I had gone in and I had rescripted part of W's logic because right Vi was built a long time ago, and so she's using a lot of older scripting practices, and so we can make the script more efficient, and we just make sure we look up things in a more efficient manner and make her easier to maintain long term because that way a designer can look in a really obvious place, look at a very obvious number, and be like, oh, that's the number I'm going to change, I'm going to change that number, right? And so things that we had changed were. Yeah, just like basically having the W look up obviously labeled data in the W, which is a really positive thing. Cool. And I was like, okay, well, let's make sure this all works because I did, rip out a decent amount of scripting and change it. So, hey, there's some risk here. Flagged it for QA, right? It wasn't a problem. We play places are, today, this morning, and it was fine. And I always like verify my changes before I submit them, but still. Anyway, on Tuesday morning, I come in and I'm like, let me just double check on Vi. And I'm like, my W isn't stacking anymore. I'm not getting any stacks. That's really weird. I didn't change how stacking was handled. I changed the buff itself to look up data differently, to look up attack speed and armor shred and whatnot in a different way, but like I didn't change the application of buff stacking. That's really, really weird. And so I open the script and I'm like, okay, it's looking up a character variable, which is a variable stored in your character. I know, shocking. But the basically like there's a character stored on Vi, a variable stored in Vi, basically at character start, and just hold it there forever. And then whenever you like deal a hit or apply your Q, it says, hey, by the way, run this little bit of script logic, apply a stack of this buff for n seconds, and that seconds is in a character variable. And when I get to this number of stacks, which is in a character variable, I need you to go apply the shred debuff and give me attack speed and all these other things, right? Run all the other logic. And I was like, this is really weird. So this character variable is seemingly returning 0 because it's not putting a buff on. That's really strange. And I went and looked, and I search through. I do like a regex search through her folder, and I'm like, I cannot find any place where this character variable is stored or saved. It's looked up in these two files, the Q and the W buff function, but it's not set anywhere. And I'm like, wait a second, she's missing her character script. Why is Vi missing her character script? That's really, really weird. That makes no sense. And I asked one of the designers to help me because I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. Like, she has a char script, right? And I was like, yeah, she's supposed to. And we like look at the like version history of Vi's folder. There's no changes since what I did, which is changing the W. And I know that when I looked at the gameplay on Monday night, she was functioning. It was fine. I was applying the W because, again, I'd like changed some stuff. Like, am I getting attack speed? Yes. Am I shredding armor? Yes. Am I doing damage? Yes. Okay, cool. We're in a good spot here. No problems. And yet, her transcript's missing. And it's just not there. Like, that's really weird. What's going on? Anyway, I just basically tell our version control, like, okay, just repopulate my Vi folder. Ignore what's on my hard drive, just repopulate this. Because here's the char script. I'm like, how did my computer delete the char script? Why is it gone? Don't know. Didn't ask. Don't know what my computer did, but it deleted her char script for no reason locally. And by the way, other characters had them. Viego's next in line, right? He's the next one alphabetically. His char script's there. No big deal. Don't know why my computer deleted her char script, but it did. It didn't submit that way, right? I like went and checked, and like our cooked build from that day was fine, right? Because I submitted on Monday night, right? I checked Tuesday morning. Tuesday morning doesn't work locally. I like load up a custom game in our internal environment, works fine. My computer deleted the char script. Do I know why? Not a clue. It happened overnight. Couldn't tell you. Either way, weird story. Wanted to tell it one, so there you go. That is going to do it for this patch. I believe there's nothing else going on. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.